Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. Liz, how are you this week?
So I am both nervous and feeling mischievous today about this one. I woke up several times in the night going, do you know your science? Do you know your science? Oh, I don't know still. But anyway, we'll see how we go.
I'm sure you're going to impress us. Today we're going to be looking at oregano, which is a very interesting essential oil, for sure. It sometimes people might just go, oh, it's just another one of the herbs along with basil or marjoram or thyme or something like that. But I think oregano has got a certain type of potency about it that should always be respected.
Yeah, it's fierce, very fierce. And actually, so we'll do that bit first. The maximum dilution, according to Tisserand and Young, is 1.1%. I think even that's too high. I would say 1%. It's a really hot oil. And interesting if you pay real close attention to Culpeper and actually read it rather than dipping into it. He does occasionally talk about essential oils right back into what was he 16th century, isn't it? And he specifically talks about the danger of using certain essential oils internally, and oregano is one of them. That he says it's too hot, shouldn't do it, must dilute it. And yeah, it is fierce. And what's interesting is it often gets confused with another extremely good product on the market called oregano oil. So not oregano essential oregano oil, which is a different thing, and that can be taken internally. So let's kind of address that first, so we're clear on what it is we're talking about. Oregano oil is like the fresh herb that's been macerated or made into a tincture. So that's designed so you it usually comes with a pipette, you scoop it up, put it into your water, and then drink like 200 ml of it a day. Fantastic as like a prophylactic, preventative medicine against all sorts of bugs and germs. That is designed to be weak for you to be able to use that. And I'm going to use the air things because it isn't weak, it's just safe. Whereas the oregano essential, if you drank that, if you put that into water, first of all, oil and water don't mix, so it'll float, so there's no dilution at all. So you're not just using like 1% dilution, as we said earlier, you're using 100% dilution, and it will really be quite horrible to do. I mean, we don't say that we can't take it internally, because that would be daft, because we eat oregano all the time in our house. God, what do you want for tea? Spaghetti bolognese. I don't know why I bother asking every time. So you imbibe lots of it, but it's so concentrated in that form. It's not a good plan. You should always dilute it and use it topically.
Definitely. I must say, oregano, when it comes to dilution, whenever we're putting any oils on our skin, should always be diluted anyway. Let's be honest, we can sneak a little bit of neat lavender or frankincense on once in a while on tea tree, and it's not going to do any harm. Oregano is just one where, under no circumstances should you be putting on undiluted. It's gonna irritate the skin in some degree, isn't it?
Yeah. It is very irritant. Yeah, and it's irritant to the skin, but also it's a dermal irritant, but also it's irritant to the mucous membranes.
Very much.
Again, if you were thinking, oh, I've got a really stuffy nose, you wouldn't want to put it up your nose. Fool for doing that. That's really going to hurt you and probably make your nose bleed, because it thins the blood as well.
Yeah. So oregano, I think it's you and I use our oils in different ways. I love to use oils, like from the moment I get up in the morning, a diffuser goes on, to when I get into bed at night, oils go on my feet. I'm not doing that for any health issue in particular. I'm using it for proactively in that kind of way. Whereas, you work a lot with clients when they've got a health issue and, that type of thing as well. For me, though, oregano has a special place, and it's definitely not an oil that, I would be using every single day. My rule is normally 5 days on, 5 days off, but I use it not proactively. I use it when I start to see things going wrong with my immune system and I'm starting to get sick. I call oregano the Terminator. He's known for being antiviral, antibacterial, antimicrobial, anti-bloom, everything. So he's the one to come out when you start to get that, oh, my throat's feeling not quite right, or the muscles start aching. You're like, okay, let's bring out the Terminator. And that's where I use oregano.
Yeah, and I think that like archetype that you chose was spot on. If I was to pick an archetype, I don't know if it will translate in other countries, but I would say the SAS. So not just the army, but the special armed forces. These
Mm,
are the ones you send in where when we can't get rid of a big leader or whatever, and we're going to hunt him down and completely wipe him out. So absolutely exactly the same archetype. Yeah.
yeah. When are you normally finding that you are reaching for oregano in particular?
So I use it for digestive issues. I think it's really good for digestive. I use it for I say coughs and colds. If it's like a sniffle, nah, I'm not going for that. But if I've got like a chest infection starting or something like that, and like respiratory, as in like maybe lower respiratory more than upper respiratory, really, where you've got that sense of congestion, and it is expectorant, but there are other oils that are better expectorants, like hyssop, for example. People go, "Oh no, you don't use hyssop." I blooming love hyssop, I do, for my
Mm,
bad lungs. But I would always underpin with oregano. So I'm going to make a blend, and I'm going to put them behind it. These are the people with the great big spears.
yes.
With the bayonets and stuff, right? So let them do the skillful stuff. Oregano's going to come in and go, and I'm going to get you. So anything like that. Also, like fungal infections, particularly like things like candida. Although I have to say that's a really good way to use oregano oil as opposed to oregano essential oil. Um, those kind of infections and like chronic conditions that don't go away. So like
Mm,
candida, where it's just like there's no getting on top of it, Lyme's disease, things like that are underlying, and you're like, what on earth am I going to do with that? I would use oregano oil and oregano essential oil together in different ways. So yeah, fungal infections definitely. Um, as I say, things like bronchitis. Also, if somebody has lost their appetite, so we might say somebody who has anorexia, although I'd lean more into tarragon, to be honest, on that side, and I can't really explain why, I don't think. But like if you've got somebody who has been ill for a long time and I just don't want to eat anything, and of course then that's a really dangerous moment in that things are going to go downhill from there. Oregano is a good one. So of course you've got you using it in cooking, but you can use it in your blends as well.
yeah. And not only has it been used effectively with humans, but also I know that in places such as USA, they're actually putting oregano essential oil in chicken food, because it's more powerful than antibiotics in killing superbugs and so on.
Yeah, and actually that's an area I should have said as well. Parasitic, so worms and things like that. I think Culpepper and Gerard both suggest it for scorpion bites. Now in Ludlow, I would never have a need to use that, but that shows how strong an anti-venom it is, that it could tackle something as strong as that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been talking about it over the last few minutes about how powerful it is and all these kind of archetypes and that type of thing. One thing that's kind of doesn't quite sit right with me is it's often referred to as joy of the mountain, and it
Did it?
doesn't quite have
Is
a
that
joyous
true? Is
nature.
that true? Does that not sit right with you? Because I really feel very strongly that that's no way that's Joy of the Mountains. You're quite right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any idea what the origin of that is,
Oh well,
or?
I think that it's the translation is correct. So I've looked. So let me give a bit of background. In right at the beginning of the Melissa work, and I had no idea who these women were and what they were doing. One thing that occurred to me was this herb, which is you quite rightly say is called Joy of the Mountains, is was on the hillside and bees would have been flocking around it, but also probably were the herbal healers. And so I could see how that imagery might come, that they're always around the herbs like the bees are.
Mm,
But there is like, so the translation is correct, that it is a joy of the mountains, but this idea that it was a favourite of Aphrodite's. Why would it be a favourite of Aphrodite's? That makes no sense to me. But when you look at the medicine of marjoram and how marjoram makes you feel, I think that fits, and that is oregano majora, isn't it? It's still oregano. I think it's not the same. I think
same one.
And I think now that like somebody's written it down and everyone's gone, oh, that's it, and it's been regurgitated over and over again. But I can't see how that is correct. So that's a favourite of Aphrodite, but marjoram would make sense to me that it would be.
Yeah, very much indeed. And when we kind of talk about how we'd use it on an emotional level, I've talked often about what an oil will do physically. It does emotionally and holistically as well. So we've kind of explained that oregano works very well as that kind of Terminator SAS kind of archetype in that type of way. It's also, obviously, the oil is gifted from the leaves. So any oil that comes from leaves is associated with the element of air, and so to do with the mind. So what I find oregano really, really great for is shaking up thought patterns that no longer serve us. Just as oregano goes through the body and gets rid of any bacteria, any fungi, any virus, anything that's not serving us in that way, it can also be used with the mind for breaking apart old habits. So if we look at kind of, we can get stereotypical and typical Taurians that tend to be a bit stubborn, or anyone who's kind of like, it's always been this way and I'm going to keep it this way, but that's no longer serving you. I'd really reach in for oregano for that way. Tarot-wise, I correspond oregano with the Tower card. Now, if you're not familiar with the tarot, if you Google an image of it, you'll see a big tower has been struck by lightning and there's two people falling out of the tower. Now, if you look at their faces, one is screaming, but the other one is actually smiling. And so oregano almost is about there's a need for a shake-up in life. And I reach for it on a holistic or an emotional level when someone is feeling stuck, when they're being rigid and they need a bit of a shake-up. And in fact, magically, it's been used in past centuries for breaking apart regimes. So really interesting that I love oregano for that. Let's deconstruct in order to regrow and flourish, like the tarot card of the Tower often represents.
Interesting that you said regimes. That's exactly the kind of imagery I said about sending in the SAS, isn't it? Wipe out the leader. I like that very much, and I have to say, I was kind of, I knew obviously you were going to ask the question about the spiritual aspect of oregano, and I was like, does it have one? So I contemplated all yesterday, and I did come up with one. And then when I thought I'll hit the books and see what other people have said, and Valerie and Warwood had said exactly the same thing as I had come up with, in that I think it's very good for people who are hypochondriacs. So those, and actually I think maybe there's a different kind of hypochondriac exists now to when she would have written that. It was in the Fragrant Mind, maybe, or maybe Fragrant Heavens, can't remember which one. But obviously time has passed on, and I think we have a new generation of hypochondriacs who are very nervous because they were traumatized by COVID. So, I mean, it's unfair to say that it's an irrational thing to be a hypochondriac, because let's be honest, we're surrounded by bugs all the time. But I think it makes more sense now, after we really were, at war really with this bug before. And there are a lot of people who are frightened to go out and, still wearing masks and stuff, and for whatever reason. And their reality now must be very different to the rest of us who have kind of just gone, well, I'm getting on with it. So I think oregano would be really helpful for those, because you've got that sort of preventative medicine aspect of it, but also because it is a warrior as well. It carries that warrior defense with it. But also there was another thing that I read. No, I can't remember the lady's name. I think her name is Hiba El Hakib. And she wrote about how it's very good for breaking down rigid structures in people's personalities, but particularly their need to be right. And I thought, that's absolutely correct. I can feel that absolutely right. So she was saying, like, there's lots of people who just don't know how to step away from a principle, you know, and they've always got to create an argument, and they create problems right through everybody. And I can see that's clever what she said. I think that's absolutely true about what Oregano would do, be able to say, no, it's all right. You can just step back from that. You don't need to keep making your point. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, obviously, when we're using it in these different levels, I don't know. It depends where people are in the world. And I find maybe people with like an Italian background quite like the aroma. I'm not a fan of the aroma of oregano as well. How would you possibly propose using it in these emotional things? Like if someone was to say, oh, let's pop it in a diffuser and that will help to break down rigid structures in the mind, I'd be like, no. Any suggestions on what you would do?
Well, bear in mind that the maximum dilution is really, really low. Remind me to come back to diffusers in a minute, because I'll forget otherwise, and I do something I want to say about that. So I would use topically. As you know, I'm not a diffuser person. I'll use an evaporator sometimes, but for the most, it's so you could put the smallest amount into a blend of something else. You're still going to get that medicine coming through. And in those kinds of situations, if you're looking to get like an emotional version of the medicine as opposed to a physical version of the medicine, you can go really, really wee, really tiny. So you could go like a homeopathic dose. We've spoken about that before, making the 1/15 of a drop. So you could say, right, okay, I've got 14 drops of carrier oil, then 1 drop of oregano. I'm going to put that in, and then I'm going to put 1 drop of that blend into my other blend. So, and you know, if we look at work like Dr. Bruce Bukowski, and he does spiritual phytoessencing, his amounts of oil are much, much smaller than even that. You know, he goes really minute amounts. So that's what I would do. I would go tiny, tiny, and then mix it with something much nicer to do.
Yeah. No, I've always found as long as you've got at least a touch of each oil in there, it brings its energy in, and it's not so much about the quantity; it's about that vibrational frequency. And I guess, you know, if we kind of think of, I'm thinking of all those kind of, you know, medieval movies that we watch, and there's always one great warrior in the battle, but he's not alone. There's a whole army. So you bring in your other oils that might help in whatever you're working with, but just that 1 drop of oregano, that small portion of oregano, is that one warrior that will come in and save the day.
So I went out yesterday with my mum, and I went to this really old tea shop, and it was like all set out like 1940s, and they got tea cozies on all the teapots, which were very cute. And I said to Mum, there's this meme going around Facebook at the moment that is something that Billy Connolly said. Do you know who Billy Connolly is?
I do, yes.
Okay,
he's stretched beyond, the UK.
Okay, right, okay. So he said, as a rule of thumb, surround yourself with people who, if they're left in a room on their own with a tea cozy, will always try it on. And I was like, yes. And that's kind of a bit like the imagery of the oregano, that you only need the tea cozy in the room, that one little drop, but you know that that's going to spread right through it. You know, it's such a strong oil, that defensive, that sort of defense nature of it, and that kind of it's like the general. It says the right thing to the rest of the army. Yeah,
interesting. Now I had to remind you, diffusers,
thank you. Yes. So the key component in oregano essential oil, and probably oregano oil, I guess, I don't know, is carvacrol. That's so depending on which version of it is, and by that I mean, does it come from this company or that country or whatever. All extractions are going to be slightly different. You're looking at around about 60 to around about 80% carvacrol, so that's a lot. So carvacrol belongs to a chemical group called phenols, and the phenols are the really powerful. They're the warriors, and they're the heat in the oil. Well, I don't know if you know that cats do not have a particular enzyme in the liver to be able to break down phenols.
Mm.
So we have to be really careful with oils that are highly phenolic around cats if they're in a diffuser. So if you imagine that like a diffuser uses a small amount of water usually to kind of send out molecules into the air, those airborne molecules can land anywhere. Particularly, they could land on a cat's fur. If the cat licks it, then it's 100% oregano, so we don't want to do that. And then what happens, of course, is when it goes into our liver, we break it out or down into lots of metabolites, and so we can manage it, but a cat can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's lots of oils like that. I should have said that really about clove and about cinnamon, but particularly with oregano, because it's really high in such a strong phenol. Yes, you can use it in your diffuser, but I would say if you've got a cat, I really wouldn't. It's, you know, you can follow the tricks of leaving the door open so they can get out and stuff, but those airborne molecules, it's a hypothetical risk, but it is a high hypothetical risk.
I must admit, anyone who's going to put oregano in a diffuser, it's not going to smell good anyway. So I'm not sure why they're doing it, but you know, if the Italians want to.
I don't think you'd put it in a diffuser ever for the point of view of just like, am I having a party or I want it to feel nice or whatever like that. But you might, if you've got like measles or COVID or whatever in the house, that's a sensible thing to do to like aerate the thing, but just be really careful around the cat.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. You talked about carvacrol. Yes.
Like Dave Grohl.
Grohl, yep. Sorry, did you say 60 to 80% in oregano?
Yeah, usually around about that, yeah.
Yep. Now, I believe thyme and some savory are other oils that also have carvacrol in them. They're at a lower level, is that right?
Yeah, certainly in time, I wouldn't even be able to tell you without. I mean, I could look on now as we talk if you want for some savory, but it's not an oil I've ever used. It's always been classed as a hazardous oil since I trained, so I don't know.
Got you. Yeah. So I do believe they are, and I often talk about them being the safer siblings or the more gentle siblings. You know, thyme especially is like oregano is that big gun when you need it. Thyme is a bit more like, okay, maybe we can bring out thyme before we actually have to go for the oregano in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think thyme is a lovely, beneficent oil. Oregano's not.
Yeah, the amount of people I've heard that have had positive experiences with, you know, really challenging health concerns, that have like they swear by thyme. I have people that will come and like, I don't care about any other oils, but give me, I need some thyme because you know that they find that they believe it's the cure all kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, we talk about the differences between different aromatherapies between different like countries. We always talk about like French aromatherapy and how that they take it internally. French aromatherapy kind of pretty much evolves completely around thyme oil.
Interesting. I wasn't aware of that. Yeah,
it's one of their most important oils.
Yeah. Okay. Chakras. What chakras would you associate oregano with? I've got a bit of an unusual layout for this one.
You know, I haven't even really thought about it. I guess. Well, you could say root. I wouldn't really say it was sacral. Yes, solar plexus because like identity issues and digestive issues. Wouldn't say heart. Absolutely don't agree with Joy of the Mountain, so not heart. Or do agree with the name, but not the Aphrodite association. Throat, yeah, I can see throat maybe, because it's definitely good for like gargles, for sore throats and stuff like that. Not third eye, not crown. Well, I'm not really coming up with a great one. You're obviously going to come up with a different one.
Oh, no, it's interesting listening to your process then. I choose two different chakras to it. The main one probably is the base chakra. I think it's really interesting working with the base chakra, not so much when we want grounding and safety, because we've talked about today about it actually shaking that up. But sometimes when we have an underactive base chakra or we're locked into how something should be, but that's not serving us anymore, we need to kind of renovate our way of being to regain a sense of safety. And I think oregano can be really good for kind of if a base chakra is sitting in a wrong spot of like this is not where you're going to find safety, like clinging on to the past when the base chakra, especially in these modern times, if you're not willing to evolve and adapt and change, you're going to get left behind and you're going to struggle. And that's why I often find people, especially the elderly, struggle with their base chakra because they're still trying to do things the way they used to do them, and it's just not working. So oregano can actually help with allowing us to progress and keep evolving in this modern world. And if I always like to go back to nature. And if you look in nature, nothing stands still. Everything is either growing, or if it's not growing, it's decaying. Even rocks are either growing in some way, or they're starting to get weathered in that way. So oregano kind of keeps us moving in that right way. So base chakra, the primary one. But I kept finding different authors and teachers and so on talking about it being a throat chakra one. I was like, oh, I'm not totally feeling that, but I kind of sat with it. I've kind of come to peace with the idea of, well, how do we bring about change? If we look at which energy center would be that, it's our words. Sometimes the throat chakra is referred to as being the bridge of peace. Through our words, we can actually create harmonious relationships and create peace. But at the same time, we can also disrupt peace and shake things up. And the first way to do that is through our self expression and what we actually say. So, although we may be feeling different things within us, the throat chakra is a bit of a channel that goes, hey, I'm going to shake things up, and oregano would support that. I'd normally in my throat chakra work, I'd work with the eucalyptuses, I'd work with the cypresses, I'd work with the chamomiles. They tend to be my favorite ones for the throat chakra for more that free flowing, healthy communication. But again, oregano is a special occasion type of essential oil. And when you need to speak up, maybe you've been in a situation where you've been putting up with something for too long. It's time to kind of be empowered and say something. Then a dab of oregano in one of those throat chakra blends could be really beneficial.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you came to the same conclusions as me. It was interesting to say, isn't it? What I would say is, if you're working on your throat chakra with oregano, know that your words probably are not going to come out kind. They're not going to be subtle.
No.
They're not going to be tactful. So there's a thing about that. Very similar to sweet basil. She don't care what she's got to say. She's just going to say it and better move out the way right now. And it's a bit like that. Whereas I think that she's like a bit like that. Whereas I think that it kind of will be cutting the way that you say it if you say
very abrasive
with oregano, and there's definitely going to be heat in it. And I suppose, I mean, I know it's like an unusual thing, but I'll skip forward because whether you'll ask about planetary rulership, I think when I've looked it up, loads of people have said Jupiter. I'm like, I don't go with that. But it seems like a Mars thing to me, like the drive and the passion and the way that it acts on the blood, it thins on the blood. That's a Mars thing, and so you could kind of use it like instead of using the word passion, I'm going to say tempest. Like a real tempestuous, fiery relationships. The Italian, kind of archetype. You can see how it's that. So you could use it, I guess, as some kind of aphrodisiac, but you'd have to be very clever with your blending.
Yeah. If I had to pick a major planet, Mars, I would also agree with oregano, but I often associate with Eris, who is a dwarf planet, who is the sister of Mars and the goddess of discord and strife. Again, as she transits around, when she's in retrograde, where she is in your birth chart, is normally where you like to shake things up, where you like to cause a bit of revolution or discord and that type of thing. So when it comes to Eris, my primary oil that I often go for is actually oregano, and mix it in with things like a bit of cardamom or something like that as well to really, shake it up for sure.
I mean, somehow, quite often when I'm doing this kind of work, there's another narrative in the background that's going on, and it makes no sense to articulate it because it's not related, but it is related. And it really feels, when I'm talking about this oregano, that there's a parallel to what's going on in Gaza. The revolution, the fighting, the things coming to the surface. It's kind of like and like you say about Eris and Mars, there feels like a parallel going on there.
Very much so, yeah. And when we think about the tower card, it is there must be destruction in order there to be new growth in that
Breaking
type of
down of
way.
the
So
regimes. Yeah.
sometimes, you know, probably if we take it to something a bit more personal or on an interpersonal level, when sometimes a marriage that hasn't been serving the two individuals for a long time, eventually it comes to a head, and Oregano will bring it to a head because both people really deserve to be with someone who loves them and they love. And so that relationship falls apart, it's messy, it's just, all that type of thing. But hopefully they both go off and they find two people where they can actually have true loving relationships. And Oregano again is that one that it almost throws the cat amongst the pigeons to bring it up. So it's
There is,
really good
I
in that
mean,
way.
there's a sense as well, like when you bring those two together, of the feeling of be careful what you're told. Don't
Mm.
listen to everything that you're told. Um, how do you feel next to it? So it's funny that both of us said the same thing about Joy of the Mountains. That doesn't seem right to me. And then we've got this like Palestine narrative going on. The British government are taking a very strong stance against people who are protesting, and they're calling these protests hate crimes. And then suddenly that's the word we're living by. And I think most people are like, no, actually, we see both sides of this, and this is a humanitarian crisis, and I'm on the side of humanity here. But the papers don't say that, and the politicians don't say that, and it kind of does feel like oregano medicine, like getting ready to go. No, we power to the people in a way,
Very true. And when we think about, I talked about leaf oils before being very much to do with the mind, and I like to kind of put them in subcategories where you've got your big tree leaf oils, so that's our firs and our spruces, our eucalyptuses, and they tend to be very expansive and open the mind. Whereas all your small plant leaf oils, so oregano, basil, peppermint, lemongrass, things like that, they focus the mind. And we talk about regimes, and we probably think about political regimes, but there is a bit of a people have an adversity to big corporations, big government, the big controlling bodies of this world. And I feel oregano kind of encourages us to let's just have a look at the truth. I've been talking to friends about the situation in Gaza at the moment, and the protests that are happening in different parts of the world, and London comes up because you see on social media, the footage of these violent clashes and all these different types of things. And I'm encouraging, some people to kind of go, well, look, remember that hype sells news. So I'm not saying that, and they're sending me footage, but when I'm actually watching the violent clashes,
yeah,
it's normally zoomed right in
yeah.
to a couple of police with a couple of people having a scuffle, although there's a large amount of people around. Most of them are holding their phones to filming it. And you go, oh my God, it looks really bad because, not that I did too much media studies at school, but when you zoom into something, that's where it gets scary, when you zoom into the scary moment. But if you look at the grand scale, you're like, okay, well, 50,000 people protested peacefully. Couple had a few too many
There's
drinks.
no doubt that the
Things like
media
that.
is being provocative.
Yeah,
There's none. And I saw a wonderful reel this morning saying, what we don't need provocation right now. We need calming. That's what we
yes,
need. The whole thing needs to calm down, and we need to be the light that calms everybody down. And I think we kind of have come full circle to what we said right at the beginning, that we don't, not provocation isn't always the right thing. This spikes in aggression isn't always the right thing. So we don't use oils like oregano that
oregano
spike
occasionally.
all
Yeah,
of the time. We use calm as much as we can. We allow our body to keep coming back into homeostasis. But as you quite rightly say, and actually, maybe this is like more of a I'll behave myself today and say an Uranus kind of thing, that it's like the individual and the collective, but the necessary break of regimes. That's kind of what we've been talking about with this oil.
very much so. And it could be one, even looping back round to the throat chakra and what we're doing on an individual level. I would probably mix it in throat chakra things with something like Roman chamomile for the
Yep.
throat chakra, which my kind of mantra for Roman chamomile is a gentle nudge is more powerful than a shove.
Yep.
And hinoki, which is very much about being calm and wise and selective with your words. And so let's say that you've been putting up with a situation in your life that's not good enough. Oregano might give you the strength to say something, but if you just go oregano, like we talked about, you're going to burn your bridges. How can you use oregano to give you the confidence to speak up, but the Roman chamomile and the hinoki maybe to articulate that in the most potent, powerful way that will get the effect you want rather than just you blurting out your fury.
Yeah, or something like. I mean, the difficulty is the oils that probably are most helpful to it probably smell disgusting next to it, to be honest. So, like, for example, mandarin, very convivial, very chatty, really knows about communication, but would smell horrible. So you'd have to think really carefully about how you blended that with. But actually, Roman chamomile might be a third wheel that would make it right. Rose, that beautiful beneficence, that gentleness, fantastic. Melissa, the bees are supposed to be the voices of the muses, so that wisdom and those the honeyed tongue, all of those things, those kind of thoughts back to the ancient ways of putting things together can be quite helpful for doing those kind of emotional blends, spiritual blends.
Very much so. Now, our masterclass that we're going to be doing in December, we're going to be focusing on immunity, and that's why we wanted, oregano kind of snuck in there. We're going to focus on the solstices as well, and kind of the holiday season. But I think I'm just kind of inspired after our conversation today. If people are interested, I'd love to do a little bit of throat chakra work on how to make your own personal throat chakra blend. And I've got a little bit of a quiz that we can run during the masterclass. So anyone who registers for that can do the quiz, and even if you get the replay and you can't be there live, then oregano definitely is one of the oils in there, but it might give you some suggestions on other ones to slot in there as well. So that's coming up in just a few weeks' time at the end of this month.
Yeah, we're ahead of our game for a change. We know what oils we're going to do, don't we? So next week we'll do cardamom, and then the following week we will do myrrh, which will sneak in, which is obviously the book that I'm writing at the moment. So be interesting for everybody to come along and hear some of the stuff about myrrh.
So remember, whether you're watching us now on YouTube or you're listening to us on one of the podcasting platforms, there's always a description below. We always have the link there, and we've got the discount code. So bloomin' use it. So you can save the 20% off as well. It's fellowship in all capital letters as well. Anything else that we need to shamelessly plug before we let everyone go and play with their oregano?
The only thing I'm going to remind people is, if you're worried about things like maximum dilutions and stuff, you can get this free on Amazon, don't forget, or obviously send me some money by buying the paperback again on Amazon. But all of those like maximum dilutions and contraindications are all in there.
I'm going to throw in just a little point that people don't always realize as well. When people are authors, we have various ways of distributing our book. But as often as you can, if you can go back to the author's website or purchase from them, they're getting remunerated more fully for their work. If you're buying it on things, different third parties or through distributors or even shops, obviously the profits have to be shared between the people that got those products out. So if you're a big fan of an author, whether it be Liz, myself, or anyone else as well, what I always do when I hear about a book is I go to their website. I look at whether I can buy it off them, and if not, I go where they refer me as well. So some people just don't realize that, and they're like, "Oh, I just bought your book," kind of thing. But
that's absolutely right, and I do always write a note in the ones I send out.
Oh, beautiful! Yep, there's a difference. I know in some of my books, some of them I'll make $30 profit, and others I get paid about 30 cents profit off them.
Yeah.
So that makes a difference. But we thank you for purchasing our books wherever you purchase them anyway, and spreading the word. We'll be back next week when we're going to dive into another passionate oil of cardamom. I've got lots to say about that, so I'm really excited about cardamom. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and take care of Mother Earth, because she's giving us all these mountain joy oils like oregano.
Love it. Bye-bye.